Welcome to Build Apps for Any Device with .NET, part of the Telerik DevCraft Q1 2014 online conference. In this first section, we're going to talk about Telerik UI for Windows 8 and Windows Phone. So what's cool and new for Telerik UI for Windows 8, you might ask? A lot. But before we get into what's new, let's talk about Telerik UI for Windows 8. Originally called the Telerik Rad controls for Windows 8, we have both XAML and .NET, as well as HTML and WinJS controls. And we actually released our control set before Windows 8 became generally available. We now have Telerik UI for Windows 8.1, keeping up with the Windows versions for both XAML and HTML. And we have the Telerik data storage for Windows 8 and Windows 8.1. And we have very rich quick start frameworks, which I'm going to show you today. These are feature-rich sample apps available in the Windows Store and ship with the controls. So what do we have in the XAML controls? Well, we have lots of input, autocomplete box, numeric box, date and time picker, slider, data visualization controls, gauges, all kinds of charts, and a bullet graph. We have a new map control. I'm going to show you that today. For layout, we have the hub tile as well as pagination controls. We have a radial menu. We have data display options such as the grid plus the data storage, and we have a calendar control. For the HTML JavaScript developer, we have a lot of controls as well. Plenty of input options, including the autocomplete box, numeric box, combo box and drop-down list, date and time picker, color picker, token input and slider, data visualization, gauges, charts, and spark lines. These are very lightweight graphing controls that you can put into things like a grid. For layout, we also have the hub tile and pagination controls. We have a radial menu for HTML as well. And in the data side, we have a very feature-rich grid, data storage, as well as a data source option. And we have a calendar and we have a scheduler. Real quick, the data storage for Windows 8 allows your app to store data while offline. And this works for C# as well as JavaScript and leverages SQLite. We're going to have a much more in-depth look at the data storage for Windows 8 in the Occasionally Connected App session. So enough of the PowerPoint. Let's dive right into a demo for the Windows 8 controls for XAML. What's new and what's cool? Let's see how easy it is to use the controls. Let's do a new project, Windows Store, blank app, and we'll see our project get created. Now if we open up mainpage.xaml, see we grid right here, let's open up the toolbox. And here we see Telerik UI for Windows 8.1. Let's go down and add a calendar. So we'll just drag it over to the grid. And once we do that, we'll see a couple of things happen. First of all, we have a using Telerik UI XAML controls.input. And over here, we have Telerik UI for Windows 8.1 XAML added to the project. And we'll run it in the simulator. And you see we have a calendar control right away. Now let's stop this app. We click on the Rad calendar, go over to properties. You see here under miscellaneous all the different properties that we have for our controls. You can very quickly change how it looks and how it acts all through the property windows right in Visual Studio. So that's just a quick overview of adding a control into a regular Windows 8 project. Now let's take a look at the QSF and see all of the cool features that we have available to you. All right, let's take a look at the QSF for Telerik UI for Windows 8 XAML. The source code is available in the Telerik install directory under Program Files, and you can also get the app from the Windows Store. Let's first take a look at some of the updated charts. So here's the overview page, and let's go into look at these specific examples. Let's start with the point series. All right, now that we're at the point series, we have a whole menu of options available for you. First and foremost, for all of the controls and all the examples in the Quick Start framework, you can look at the source code merely by going to the app bar and selecting code. And you can also turn it off. There are also a quick menu here to look at all the chart examples, and I can pin this particular example to the start. So the point series obviously allows you to put a whole lot of data on an individual chart. Let's go back to the control page, look at the step series charts. We have a step line and we have a step area. We also have a new range series of charts. So this is the range bar chart, which shows the New York City temperature ranges, the highs and lows, as a series of bars. And we also have a range series where we show all the highs connected, all the lows connected, and then the area filled in between. Okay, it's enough for the charts. Let's go back and let's take a look at the map. So the map is a control that we have in beta right now, and it allows us to add data in to the chart. You can see that we can click on a geography or a state and get the square miles or the country miles and see what other things we can do with a map. So certainly the world population in millions, very, very easy to see. It's great to be able to visualize your data and not be just looking at a series of numbers. But the map isn't just for geography or what we would think of as a map control. You can also use it for seat maps. So here is where the seats are for a particular theater or stadium. And we can click on it to show then a view of the seats from the field. Okay, for those of you that are new to our controls, I want to show you the grid real quick. There's a lot of grid examples. I don't have time to go into all of them. We have filtering, we have grouping. If I want to change a grouping level, I can just click on here. It removes order ID from the grouping. I have additional settings. So in the QSF, you see all these different settings that you can set, and it very visually teaches you how to use the grid. Again, I don't have time to go into all the details I would like to on a grid, but certainly it is very, very powerful and can do a lot of different visualizations for you. Finally, we'll look at the radio menu real quick. The radio menu allows us to save a lot of space. Real estate is important in Windows 8, right? We want to do the content over Chrome. So here's a radio menu where we can change the font. And here's a custom radio menu where you can say, I want to share with Twitter or Facebook or Pinterest or send an email. So we click down here, I look at the radio menu, I can rotate it, I can flip it. The menu goes away when I'm done with it. And then here are some custom ones. I click on that and it allows me to share it through various social media. So it's very unobtrusive and very Windows 8. So that's all I have time to show you today. I hope you take a deeper look into our Windows 8 controls, both XAML and HTML. I think you're really going to be surprised about how well your apps turn out very, very quickly. All of our controls are optimized for touch, keyboard and mouse ready, and store ready. To get more information about the Windows 8 controls, you can go to docs.telerik.com. That actually has help for all of our controls. The documentation, demos, and forms are available at telerik.com/support. And for specific information about Telerik UI for Windows 8 XAML, telerik.com/help/Windows-8-XAML, and on the HTML side, help/Windows-8-HTML. Now I'd like to bring my good friend Michael Crump up on the stage to talk about Telerik UI for Windows Phone.
Thank you, Phil. So just like with Windows 8, we were the first to market with Windows Phone 7. That tradition carried through with Windows Phone 8. So right now we currently have 60 Windows Phone controls available. Some of our most popular controls are our charts, DataBoundListBox, ImageEditor, and more. So besides our traditional controls, we have 10 cloud-powered controls available. Besides the controls, we've created 50+ design templates that help you create content and page templates through our built-in wizard. We also have added application building blocks that allows you to implement functionality such as trial or rate reminder or sending an email to the developer if your application crashes. We have plenty of samples available. We have a quick start framework and a variety of sample apps that you are free to download from your account. With the chart control found in Telerik UI for Windows Phone, you can create rich and exciting data visualizations with ease. The chart was designed to handle large amounts of data in real time. It offers 20 different chart series from pie, bar, and line to many more, and there's a whole set of other features our charts include, such as tooltip, pan and zoom, trackball, selection, and annotations. DataBoundListBox is a fast and lightweight version of the standard long list selector component. With this control, your end users can navigate through thousands of items without ever slowing down the application. RadDataBoundListBox supports defining a header and footer, as well as supports per item animations which are applied when the data source changes. It also includes pull to refresh functionality. There are also other features such as wrap mode, multi-selection with checkboxes, and much more. Thanks to the image editor, end users can edit images inside your app and save them. If they don't like a change they made, they can simply discard it. So the image editor is a set of editing controls supporting operations such as crop, resize, contrast, auto fix color, blur, and much, much more. Let's dive into a couple of demos. Inside of Visual Studio 2013, I went ahead and set up a sample project that includes 3 buttons. The one that goes to a chart XAML page, as well as a DataBoundListBox, and then the image editor. I've also added in the references that's required in order to use these controls. So let's go ahead and let's take a look at the chart now. So by clicking on chart.xaml, you will see that I've went ahead and added in chart rad Cartesian chart, and I'm just giving this the name of chart. One thing that you notice is that our smart tags located here, this enables you to quickly set up the XAML for a chart without actually digging through some documentation. So you'll see there's a variety of charts that's listed here. So I'm going to go ahead and I'm going to select a bar chart, for example, and I'm going to select the first option, and it's going to say we're going to replace the existing XAML. Are you sure? We're going to select continue. And from here we already have a chart that's set up. Now there's a couple of lines of XAML that's included in this that you would probably want to look at more in depth. But since we're limited on time, I'm just going to show you how we can actually set up some data. So I'm going to go to chart.xaml.cs, and for this series I've added in this.chart.series0.itemSource equals new double, and I've provided it some data points. If we go back to the XAML, you can see that there's a couple of data points, or 3 data points, that's located here that shows you some design time data. So let's go ahead and let's run the application, and let's take a look at our chart. We'll click on chart, and you can see our 8 different data points. Obviously, if you wanted to play with another chart series, you could simply use our built-in wizard and create that chart and then add in the data points that is needed for your specific needs. So taking a look at the DataBoundListBox next, you can see that I've already added a DataBoundListBox, and I've added in 2 buttons to add items or to delete items. And if we navigate and look at our XAML, you'll see that I've added in a Telerik primitives RadDataBoundListBox. I've given it a name as well as a height, and then I've turned on is pull to refresh enabled. And then there's a method that's called refresh requested, and you can see that I've added in that method as well. I have added in 2 different animations. I've added in an item added animation as well as an item removed animation, and with those you can do things such as set the start point, end point, as well as the duration. And you can also change the different type of animation being used. So in this example, I'm going to ease out on an item added animation, and whenever we remove an animation, I'm going to ease in. If we take a look at our code behind file, then we can see that we're first creating an instance of a new observable collection and just giving it the name of source. We're adding a loaded event handler, and then we're populating it with some data, and this is just some companies. Finally, we set the RadDataBoundListBox.itemSource to the source that we defined here. If we go ahead and click on add, then it's going to just randomly select one of these companies and add it to our 0 index. And we can just simply do that by going to this.source.insert. If we want to remove an item, it's just this.source.removeAt, and again I'm passing in the index. And then when the user actually pulls down on the pull to refresh, then this method is called, and it simply adds in pull to refresh item added, and we can stop the animation by calling stop pull to refresh loading by setting that to true. Let's run the application, and we'll select DataBoundListBox. Our items just animated in. I'm going to add a couple of items here. So I've just added in 2 items, and you could see how they were adding. I'm going to remove them. So now you can see how they are being removed from the screen. And then if I wanted to pull to refresh, I just pulled down, and now our pull to refresh item was added. Let's take a look now at our image editor. So here we went ahead and I've declared a Telerik image editor, rad image editor, and I've provided it a source. We have 3 methods, and that's for image saved, image edit canceled, and then image saving. We can begin by adding these tools. So for example, here's the crop tool by simply adding in Telerik ImageEditor and then the name of the tool. So I've added in crop tool, and here's the resize tool. We have an orientation tool, and then so forth. As far as the code behind, if they cancel out of editing an image, then it's just going to show them a message box saying editing canceled. If they save an image and the image is saved successfully, then it displays image saved. Before the image saved method is called, there is an image saving, which we're just going to specify the file name as well as the JPEG quality, and I've set that to 100. One thing to note is that inside of the WM app manifest, you're going to want to make sure that underneath capabilities that you have added id_cap_medialib_photo. So we'll run the application, we'll click on Image Editor, we'll begin by selecting crop and select OK. We can go into orientation, for example, if we wanted to, and change the orientation of the file. I'm going to go into contrast and change the contrast. We could obviously do a couple of other things. I'm just going to type in the word awesome here, and we'll add it to the very top of the screen. And I'm going to select OK and then OK. So at this point the image has been saved. If we go back and we go inside of the photos and we go to albums and then saved pictures, we can see our awesome picture being shown. So just as a friendly reminder, we have data storage for Windows Phone 8 as well as the cloud-powered controls coming up in the Solving the Occasionally Connected App Problem session. And then we have the Design Templates and Application Building Blocks coming up in the Code Faster and Smarter session. Some resources before we leave: you can go to www.telerik.com/products/windows-phone.aspx. That is our main landing page for Telerik UI for Windows Phone 8. In order to get some information on getting started, as well as check out our learning materials and our vibrant community, you can go to telerik.com/support.aspx. We have a white paper on creating a Twitter client. You can go to bit.ly/Twitter client-WP, and the sample apps can be found in your account at telerik.com/account.
Thanks, Michael. Now we're going to move into the ASP.NET portion of the session, and we're going to start with what's cool and new in Ajax for Q1 2014. I'd like to introduce Jeff Fritz and bring him up on the stage. Jeff?
Thanks, Phil. My name is Jeff, and I'm going to talk to you about what's cool and new for Telerik UI for ASP.NET Ajax. Some of you have been with us for a long time. For those of you who haven't used the Telerik controls for ASP.NET, let me give you a quick summary of what we've got in the package. This is a mature product that's been around for more than 10 years. You know that it's been tested, it's been hardened, it's ready for you to use. We've got more than 80 controls and frameworks in the box for you, including all the popular ones that we know you need, like a grid, an editor, a scheduler, charts, gauges, tree views, menus, ribbons, all kinds of cool stuff. It's in the box for you. I challenge you to come up with a control that you might need that we don't have for you. And if we don't have it, we'll make it for you. We support most of the major modern browsers that have been available since Windows XP. Those are Internet Explorer versions 6 through 11, Chrome, Firefox, Opera, Safari. Let me tell you, we support browsers that are older than my kids, okay? We've got mobile web and touch support. When we build ASP.NET components, we make sure that mobile and touch are first-class citizens when we build these controls for you. We've got samples available online at demos.telerik.com/ASP.NET-Ajax. In fact, when you check out that website, look for the QR codes on the web pages. Try taking a picture of that QR code with your mobile device so you can see just how great our mobile support is with those controls on your mobile device. It's a great experience. Alright, enough of these slides. Let's get to the demo. If you've seen my presentations before, you know I like to show you a lot of code and how you can get into these controls and what you can get bare bones first thing without having to add any additional code, straight markup. So I'm going to show you our new control in Image Gallery, how we've updated the scheduler to better support mobile capabilities. You've asked for it, we've got it. I've got 6 new chart types for you. Let's get over to Visual Studio and check it out. Alright, so let's start off talking about this image gallery. Maybe you're like Telerik and you just had a big company event. We just had our big rebranding and our platform launch, and everybody all over the world took pictures of themselves, and we want to put them together and put them in a nice image gallery to show off to the rest of the employees. Let me show you how we can take some of these photos that I have here in this folder and very quickly make a compelling image gallery with no code. I'm going to put a script manager on the page, because we do that for every one of our Ajax controls. Here it comes. This is how easy it is. Let's put down a rad image gallery. Run at equals server, ID equals gallery. Let's make the width, let's constrain that to 400. Let's constrain our height to 600. And let's say my image folder path equals, and I've stored my images under images, hoodies, because everybody got a cool hoodie to celebrate our rebranding and platform launch. That's it. Let me start this up in Chrome and show you what it looks like. So here we go, a page with an image gallery on it. I've got some thumbnails across the bottom, and I've got Jeff the Pirate up front showing off his hoodie, and I can very easily flip through and see all my photos. I mean, how cool is this? I didn't have to write any code. I just have images in a folder, and it just works. I can hide my thumbnails down here. I can go full screen if I want, and I can even start playing the slideshow, and it'll automatically advance my images. There's a bunch more options in here. You can control how long the slideshow runs. You can control all kinds of things about how the thumbnails are positioned and their sizes. Check it out in the demo site. I'm sure you're going to find this very useful. Let's make our way over to a charts demo. Oh yes, we have more charts. Starting from the left, let's take a look at the box plot chart we have now. So I've added this new logo here. You've got these great boxes here so you can see your financial data. We've got this tooltip that pops up automatically so you can see those fine details that you're looking for when you see a chart like this. What's going on in November and December, huh? All right, funnel. So when you want to have your sales pipeline types of chart, this is what we have for you. So you can clearly visualize how your leads are coming through the sales pipeline. That's a pretty good conversion rate. Bands. We can now put bands on our charts. This is, of course, on a column chart, so we can highlight February and we can show kind of the median amount of area there going across. Polar charts. So when you want to show some information that pertains to angles of where things occur in space, and you want to show maybe where something occurs in the sky, we've got you covered with this type of polar chart. Radar charts. When you want to show a bunch of different data points and you want to draw a circle around it so you can see different things, this is a great way to do that. I really like this chart at the end. Server CPU load by days. What's going on over the weekend there? Look at that. Saturday and Sunday on week 1, and then the second week, Friday sticks out. Yeah, we need to get some people working on the weekends on them servers. We have spline capabilities in our chart. So here's a line chart that we've added splining or curve capabilities to. It looks really nice. But the curve isn't the only spline capability we have. I'm going to flip back to Visual Studio and show you how we can set up step splining. So here I am in my spline sample, and this is very simple chart, a typical chart notation. Inside of my line series, I have a line appearance tag now. My line style is now smooth. Let's change that. We can make it normal, smooth, or step. Let's make it step, save, and refresh my browser. And now it's a step chart. It even works with other chart types. Let me show you how easily it is to change this over to an area chart and still have the splining capability. I'll just change this from line series to area series and refresh my browser. There you go. I didn't have to rebuild. It just works. All right, let's head over to the scheduler demo and see how that's been updated. So here's the scheduler, and I've loaded into it the American and Canadian Olympic hockey schedule. And congratulations, Canadians, on your women winning the gold medal over the Americans. Here's all the hockey games that have been played and, the current time that they should have been hosted there in Sochi. Now, this is the look we're kind of used to. It's full screen and it's pretty tall. And actually, when I go to view this on a mobile device, it's kind of hard because these are images and they're difficult to point out and work with. We now have a mobile render mode that fixes some of these problems. Let me flip that render mode and show you what it looks like. So here in Visual Studio, I'm going to change render mode to mobile. Go back over to the browser and refresh. Now, check that out. All of these images are now icons, and I've got my same great capability here. When I double click to open these, look at this. Nice big wide areas to work with that fit and scale inside of a mobile device. That's pretty cool. This is just a quick snapshot of some of the enhancements that we have in the new release for you in ASP.NET Ajax. I've got a number of other improvements to some of our controls I want to share with you. Our editor now has improved tracking of commands on the track changes features. You're going to be able to get more in-depth tracking of what's changed in your documents. And there's more commands converted to DOM-based commands. This will improve the reliability of those commands going forward, make it more robust across more browsers. Our pivot grid now has support for calculated fields and calculated items, a highly requested feature from you, our customers. And now we support Entity Framework 6 in all of our controls, particularly the new data source control that's been made available from Microsoft. We have new features for our media controls. The media player now supports playlists, banner ads, and it's supported on non-HTML5 compliant browsers. So that means Gary in accounting can't make any more excuses for not being able to watch the training videos you made for him. Yeah, Gary, I'm talking about you. Our Lightbox control now has new label positions you can place. There's a full screen view with stretching capabilities, and we've got new advanced animations for you. On the mobile side, there's adaptive capabilities in the scheduler and menu. You've already seen a little bit of that in the scheduler that I showed. There's responsive capabilities in the tile list. It'll stretch and grow in size appropriately for the screen. We've got elastic capabilities in our button, dock, form decorator, image gallery, notification, social share, tooltip, and window controls, with more on the way in the next release. There's now a device detection framework that you can use to detect what type of device is requesting access to your website. And finally, there's a page layout framework that you can use to make your web application respond and size appropriately for mobile devices. We've got improvements to our cloud capabilities. You can now create custom cloud upload providers for Amazon and Azure. Extend them so you can do different things, triggers, different events that you want to be able to handle when you do an upload. You can now drag and drop on the cloud upload provider to upload files directly to those services. And finally, we've updated the Amazon and Azure providers to the latest version of their SDKs. I want you to join me later. I'm going to give you an introduction to responsive web design, okay? What is responsive web design? This seems like a hot topic people are talking about. And what can I, as a web forms developer, do to address this? Well, I'm going to show you how you can simplify that solution to the responsive web design with the new page layout framework. We're going to deliver a responsive web experience that you may have seen other websites deliver, but we're going to do it without the bandwidth drain. Finally, I have some resources for you. The product page for Telerik UI for ASP.NET Ajax is at telerik.com/products/ASP.NET-Ajax-ASPX. You can get started and learn more from the community at telerik.com/support-ASPX. I have a white paper for you. Can third-party ASP.NET controls make me more productive? You can find that at bit.ly/thirdpartyaspnet. And once again, to remind you, those online demos are at demos.telerik.com/ASP.NET-Ajax. Back to you, Phil.
Continuing on the ASP.NET theme, I'd like to bring James Bender up on the stage to talk about Kendo UI for MVC Made Easy.
Today I'm going to talk to you about Telerik's Kendo UI framework and how easy it can be to use from ASP.NET MVC. So what is Kendo UI? Well, Kendo UI is a framework of web controls built on HTML, JavaScript, and CSS. This has the effect of making Kendo UI very cross-platform, very interoperable. If you're building your application in .NET, Java, PHP, Python, Ruby, or even just static HTML pages, you can use the same Kendo UI framework across all of those projects. If you're a .NET developer who's done any research into Kendo UI at all, you've no doubt heard about the MVC Server Wrappers. What are they? Well, they're simply a collection of classes that provide some things .NET developers find helpful when working with Kendo. They provide Razor support, which enables .NET developers who are used to using MVC to work in an environment they're more comfortable in, as well as a collection of service helpers, which help jumpstart your Ajax REST service development to support some of the back-end server processing for some of the controls. The easiest way to explain all this is to simply show it to you, so we're going to jump right into the demo. The first thing I'm going to show you today is what Kendo UI looks like in MVC without the wrappers. Now, I've already installed Kendo UI in this project. I'm not going to cover how I did that. There's great documentation online that will show you how to install Kendo UI in any web project you have in .NET. What I am going to show you is a view I have called Date Picker. And this is a very simple view. I have an input element down here with an ID of Date Picker. I am using jQuery in my web application here, and I'm using the document ready function of jQuery to call the Kendo Date Picker function on my input element down here, as you can see. If I run this web app, You can see I get a page with a Kendo date picker on it. It's very nice, very easy to use, and it pretty much does everything I would need a date picker to do. What if I wanted that to have a default date? Well, that's easy. I can come back here to my view, and I have to add a parameter to my Kendo date picker function. So I've added the value of Christmas as my default date. Kendo UI takes a lot of parameters as objects. In this case, I'm passing the JavaScript object with a field called value and the value of Christmas Day as a JavaScript date. If I save this and then go back and reload my page, I can see it now defaults to Christmas Day. So that's pretty simple. Even adding an element here to my date picker, and there's other things I could add, but even adding a default date, I didn't really do anything that's crazy. Even if you're not super familiar with JavaScript, this is probably something you could handle. But what about something more complex, like probably the most common control in a business web application, a grid? Kendo UI has an amazing grid. To render a grid in Kendo UI here, this is the JavaScript I've had to use. Now, if you're familiar with JavaScript, this is probably not too difficult to look at. You understand how the objects work, you understand nesting objects. But if you don't work in JavaScript every day, or you're more comfortable in Razor, this can be a little intimidating. I might not want to do that. Having said that, this does render a great Kendo grid. As you can see, I have my grid. It's responsive. I can resize, and the grid will resize with me. I can sort. I can page. I can do all kinds of great things. I get that out of the box. But I might not want to deal with all this JavaScript. Well, again, with the MVC wrappers, I don't have to. I can do all of this in Razor. And that's what I'm going to show you next. I have another solution here called Kendo with Extensions, and in this solution I've actually added the MVC wrappers. I want to show you a couple grids I've created here. The first one is called Client Grid, and the reason it's called that is because all the data is coming down with me with the view, so the data is all going to be local to the page. There's no server interaction once the page loads. And you can see that we're creating the same grid here, but in this case I'm using the Razor syntax. Now if you're a C# developer who doesn't have a ton of experience with JavaScript, this is going to look much more familiar. It's simply a set of extension methods based off of the Kendo method, which you get with the MVC extensions. And then we call the grid method, which invokes our grid, and we're passing it the model, which we received with the view, which is going to contain our data. The grid will manage the data for us as long as we pass that in. The name method provides the ID for the grid. We define the columns we want to have. In this case, we're using a lambda with an anonymous type. We simply select the columns we want to use. Now these are all strongly typed. They came off of our model, and as you can see here, I'm using the model directive to tell this view that we're using the product model. More specifically, we're using an IEnumerable, which is essentially a list of products. I'm able to define my columns. I can specify a title. I can specify a width if I like. Down here I've added a few other options. I've made this grid pageable and sortable. I've made it scrollable. I've made it filterable. Filtering is a big deal with grids. Most users really want to see that. And I've had to define some data source information down here. In this case, I am telling it that I want the page size to be 20, and it's not going to be using the server for any interactions. So if I run this page, you can see I get the same grid I got before. Works much the same way. I have my paging down here. I can sort, and I get much of the same interaction that I had before. The only really drawback to this approach, and I'm going to show you what this looks like, is that all my data has had to come down to the page with me. You can see my data is all here. Now, if you're dealing with a small set of data, that may not be a problem. And if it's a set of data that doesn't get edited, that might not be a problem either. But if you're using lots of data and it has to change quite a bit, this is not really the way you want to go. So I'm going to show you another approach that uses the server side to handle a lot of my data interaction. So this is a similar grid to the one I created previously. You can see here, I'm still binding it to a model that comes down with my view. This is so I can get that strongly typed nature in my grid. I'm defining the same columns roughly that I had before. In this case, I'm defining a command column at the beginning, and I'm using the edit command. And at the end of the grid, the far right side, I'm defining a destroy command. I'll explain what that is in a minute. Down here, I have many of the same attributes you saw before: pageable, scrollable. In this case, we're going to make this grid editable. I've added a toolbar here with a create button. Now that's going to allow us to create new records or new products if we need to. The interesting thing happens here down in the data source section. I've had to define a read action, in which case I'm calling a method called getCustomers on my server controller. And I've also had to define update, destroy, and create methods, which are also actions on my server. I've had to define in the model what the ID for my record is. Now, it's going to be the field ID, which is a GUID, but I don't really want that to be in my grid, and that's fine. I don't have to actually show that column in my grid, but I still need to let Kendo know that that's going to be the primary key for this data. So really quickly, I'm going to run this, and I'm going to show you then a little bit what's going on behind the scenes. Now, as you can see here, we hit a breakpoint in get customers. What's happening here is Kendo did not get any data with the model, but that's okay. We've defined a read action. And what's happening is when the grid is loading, it's calling this web service, and I'm getting this request object, which is a type of data source request, which is a type that ships with the Kendo MVC wrappers. I also get this data source request attribute, which kind of helps .NET serialize and deserialize this data source request object that I'm going to be getting. In this case, I have a request, and you can see the fields on here. I have a set of things called aggregates, filters, groups, and page, and sorts. What this data source request object is the data that Kendo needs for a lot of the functionality that we provide out of the box, the paging, the sorting, the filtering, the grouping. When you do that on the server side, the server needs to be able to understand what's going on and send the data down as appropriate. You can see here another value of the Kendo wrappers is that I get this object right out of the box. I don't have to try and define a class somewhere that encapsulates all this. And I don't have to worry about how it gets serialized because that's handled for me as well. I simply get a list of products from my model. I send it back down as JSON. This toData source result is also part of the Kendo MVC wrappers. It takes care of some of the serialization for that housekeeping data that's going back down to the grid. So we can see that our grid is loaded. Now I'm going to go ahead and add a new record here just to kind of demonstrate more of the server side control. We're going to call this just generic coffee. We'll say we have $10 price on it. We'll say we have 1,000 of them in stock. I'm going to hit this update button here, and these buttons are all part of that command column I created earlier. I hit the update button, and I can see I've set another breakpoint here in my controller. This data source request, we're seeing this again. Again, this is just some information that we've sent back about the state of the grid so that if there's anything we want to do on the server side, paging, sorting, whatever, we can do that here. I've also gotten back as part of my message body a product, which you notice is the product I created. Now in this code, I would normally do something to save this product. Down here in my return, I'm returning back that product as a JSON object, essentially in an array of JSON objects. And again, I'm calling this toData source result on it with the request in the model state. This is telling the grid, hey, we have this new product, it's been added to the database, and it's sending back not only that product, telling the grid, hey, load this product in the grid, it's good. It's also telling the grid how to set itself up for a lot of the other functionality that we add to it. I'll go ahead and hit F5. We can see we get back to the grid, and our new product is there. So clearly between the Razor syntax to create this grid and the wrappers classes that are provided as part of the web service backend, we see we have a lot of value here with the MVC wrappers, and I was able to create this grid much easier without having to rely on doing a lot of JavaScript, which I may not be comfortable with. So some resources here if you want to continue learning about Kendo UI and the MVC wrappers. Obviously, Telerik.com has great information about all of our products. We have a great support site at telerik.com/support.aspx. The Kendo UI page has a lot of information about Kendo in general. There's also, of course, the Kendo UI blog has a lot of great information about Kendo as well. I'd like to thank you for watching today, and please stand by for the next session. Bye.
Thanks, James. To close out building apps for any device with .NET, I'd like to bring Carrie Payette up onto the stage to talk about what's cool and what's new in Q1 2014 for our XAML products, as well as for our Winforms suite. Carrie, it's all yours.
Thank you, Phil. Let's take a few minutes now and review what is cool and what is new with Telerik UI for WPF. UI for WPF is a complete suite with over 60 touch-enabled controls. These controls will allow you to create highly functional yet beautiful user interfaces, especially when used in conjunction with one of the over 10 professionally designed themes. UI for WPF also has support for things like coded UI testing and the MVVM development pattern, so you can take advantage of this fact and gain testability, extensibility, and maintainability in your applications. Many of the most common development requirements are also handled by the controls in this suite. This includes the ability for your users to take data offline. By offering exporting functionality, you can give your users the power to export data from the controls into many of the common formats like PDF, Word, Excel, and more. What is new in Q1 2014 in the UI for WPF suite? In Q1 2014, UI for WPF announces the arrival of two very useful new features: words processing and spread processing. What these features do is allows you to quickly generate documents programmatically in leading word processing and spreadsheet formats. You can also easily convert existing documents from one file format to another. So please note though that these features are only available in WPF and not Silverlight because of Silverlight's sandboxing constraints. But go ahead and try these features out and let us know what you think. RadChartView has been enhanced in a couple different ways. First of all, smart labels for RadChartView have been enhanced with the addition of spider mode labels, which you can see on the image on the right. RadChartView has also been enhanced with direct 2D and bitmap rendering that are now available for all series types. These new enhancements will give you more choices when customizing the experiences of your charts. You now have the ability to nest RadDocking controls within one another to provide a more flexible layout when designing complex interfaces. Each nested control provides their own document hosts as well as docking compasses. Inner tabs are also available at each of the nested levels when multiple Rad panes are present. RadSpreadsheet has also been enhanced in a few different ways. First of all, freeze panes are introduced, and what this allows you to do is gives you the ability to freeze column or rows so that users can keep those visible while they're scrolling through large spreadsheets. You would typically do this on things like header column rows. Image support has also been added to RadSpreadsheet, so now you can include images on your documents as well as manipulate them directly in the control. Print and print preview functionality has also been added, and spreadsheet protection is now included with this control. So you now have the ability to define parts of the document that are to be read-only, while other cells can remain editable for the users. Only by unlocking the spreadsheet with a password can you make the read-only cells become editable once more. Let me open up our samples application now so I can walk you through some of these great new features. Alright, now that I have my sample application up, I'm going to explore all controls, and let's dive into the words processing functionality. So in this case, I'm going to just load a sample document, and it's currently a Word format. And to show off the conversion capabilities of words processing, I'm going to select to export that as a RTF document, and I'm going to click Save. I'm going to save this to my desktop as sample. And now when I go to my desktop, you can see that I have a sample file, and it is of RTF, so it went from a docx to an RTF format. And if I open it up, you can see that it did a very good job of retaining the formatting of the document. Let's now take a look at some of the integrations. So I'm going to bring up the RadGridView integration example, and you can see that I have a grid here. And I can go ahead and export that into a docx format. So let's go ahead and click export, and I'm going to name this sample 2. And so now what it's done is it's taken this RadGridView and it's exported its contents to a docx format, retaining a header on each row of the page. So let me go ahead and open up sample 2, and you can see that I have my RadGridView data now in Word format. Remember that with each of our examples from our sample application, that source code is available by clicking on the Code tab, and you're able to take a look at all the source code for each of these examples, and you can see that there's multiple files associated with this sample in particular, and you can use this left-hand menu to navigate between them. And full C# and VB.NET code are available for all the samples. So let's navigate back to all controls, and we can take a quick look at spread processing. So spread processing and words processing are two very similar controls, but they differ in the functionality with the file formats that they support. RadSpread processing deals with XLSX files, CSV files, and text files, whereas the words processing deals with RTF, docx, and TXT files. So let's go ahead and take a quick look at the generate documents, and you can see that we have another grid full of really nice data, and I can choose to export that to Excel, CSV, or TXT. So let's just go to XLSX for this case, and I'll hit export, and we'll name this sample 3 and save it. And now when I go back to my desktop, I have my sample 3 document, and you can see that the grid is now rendered in Excel. Let's move along now and take a look at our nested docking capabilities. So let's bring up our docking samples and select our nested docking. So you can see here that we have multiple areas set up with different docking controls. So if I wanted to, I can take this outer pane 3 and make it floating, and then I can move this around. And then I could set it to dockable again, and then I have the choice as to where I dock it. So you can see that there's multiple compasses available for me to use, and that's fully definable and customizable by you. So let's move on now to take a look at RadSpreadsheet. So I'm going to go back to All Controls. Let's click on the spreadsheet examples, and let's start with our freeze panes example. So by default, when we bring up this sample, this left-hand column is set to be frozen. So now I can scroll the entire document and you can see that that left-hand column stays put. I also want to show you that we do have an image in this spreadsheet. I can also select this image and I can resize it directly here in the cell, as well as do things like rotate it and flip it horizontally or vertically. I'm going to go ahead and deselect this right now. Now, you're not limited to just columns, so if I wanted to keep this upper part of the document frozen, I can go ahead and release the previous pane and set a new freeze pane on this row. So now when I scroll, this top part of the document is going to remain frozen while I can scroll through the bottom part. Another thing I want to show you really quick here is that I have the ability to protect the sheet. So this goes into that spreadsheet protection functionality that I talked about earlier. So I'm able to set a password on the document itself and then, well, basically define what the users can still do without the password. So let me just click OK there. Let's move along now to our printing example. So you can see that in this example we have the ability to set a print area, and we also have the ability to set page breaks. So you can have full control over how that spreadsheet gets rendered in your printed document. So let's go to File, Print, and you can see that we do have a print preview here. And then I can click the print button and print it on one of my many printers. So the last thing I want to show you is a little bit of a closer look at the protection. So let's bring up our protection example. And in this document, all of the labels here are set to be non-editable by your user. So if I went in to edit one of these labels, if I start typing in here, you can see that an error pops up saying that the cell you're trying to change is a protected one on this sheet. So in order to make this column editable again, I would have to unprotect it with the password. But what's nice is I'm still able to make these cells editable for my users, so I can protect parts of the document while still retaining editability in other parts. So if I want to update this value to 450, you can see that I have full access to updating other parts of the document itself. So you can see in this example I can unprotect the sheet by entering the password Telerik. So let me just go ahead and type that in real quick. And now my sheet is unprotected and I can come in and go ahead and make an edit to that cell now. So that's some great functionality that just gives you the ability to have more flexibility in your applications. The last example I want to show you for WPF brings us to Visual Studio, where I have a nice pie chart already available in a project for us. So let me show you a little bit about the spider mode labels. So let's fire this up. And you can see that if I set it to no smart labels and I change the sweep angle, you can see that we get some pretty terrible overlap. Applying some basic smart labels makes it a little bit nicer, but what's really nice is the new spider mode. So if I set it to be spider labels, you can see that it cleans up this pie chart beautifully. And you have a couple different options, so I can have spider unaligned. I can also have spider aligned outwards. So it just basically gives you more options on creating some beautiful charts in your application. Let's conclude this section on WPF with some resources. To find out more about Telerik, please visit www.telerik.com, and you can find documentation, demos, and forums for all of our products at telerik.com/support.aspx, and find out more about UI for WPF at telerik.com/products/WPF. Let's move on and find out what is cool and what is new with Telerik UI for Winforms. UI for Winforms is a complete suite with over 60 feature-rich, high-performing controls that will give you everything that you need to develop your application. With developer productivity in mind, this suite comes equipped with many smart tags and wizards that are going to help you along the way to being more productive. UI for Winforms also has you covered out of the box when you have to implement things like touch interfaces, accessibility, or localization in your application, once again proving to be a huge time saver. 18 pre-built professionally designed themes also ship with the suite, so this means that you can build beautiful interfaces that your users will absolutely love. Yet, you still retain full control over customization, so you can change things to achieve that exact look that you're going for. So what is new in the Q1 2014 release of Telerik UI for Winforms? RadDataEntry is a new control in the control suite, and what this provides you is automatic form generation based on an underlying data source. This control gives you full CRUD support, meaning that you can create, read, update, and delete objects in a collection. And it's also fully customizable, meaning that you can swap out things like the field labels or the default editor that's rendered in the form. Full validation and error provider support is provided, and when used in conjunction with the also new Rad Binding Navigator, you'll be able to easily navigate between records inside of the form using that control. RadGridView has been enhanced with an awesome new paging feature. What this does is it eliminates the need for your users to have to scroll through large sets of data in your grid. Instead, you can define a page size and have that data split across those multiple pages. And if you're using grouping in your grid, you also have the ability to set the paging behavior. So you can decide to page the data prior to the grouping function or after the grouping function. That decision is completely up to you. RadSpellchecker is another tool that's been added to the toolbox. It comes with a full dictionary that's used to identify misspelled words and text and flags them with a red squiggly underline. Right-clicking one of these flagged words provides you with a list of word suggestions, and you're able to replace that misspelled words with one from the list, or you have the ability to ignore the flagged word or add the flagged word to the dictionary so that it's not identified as a misspelling in future usages. RadCollapsiblePanel also joins the control suite. This control helps greatly when screen real estate is tight. Easily expand and collapse entire sections of your UI with the help of this control. And be sure to take advantage of the expansion direction, animation, and header positioning properties of this control. Another exciting feature enhancement is that print and print preview functionality has been added to RadChartView. You now have the choice to include Telerik Application Analytics with your application, as it's now an integrated part of the control suite. You can discover just how your application features are being used, as well as what versions of your application are currently in your environment. You can also obtain important information about your users, such as where they're located geographically in the world, the operating systems that they're running, the languages they speak, as well as hardware information such as processing power and screen resolution, and much, much more. You'd also be notified of any exceptions that may occur in your application that may not otherwise be reported by your end users. Let's now check out some demos. The first control that I want to demonstrate is the RadDataEntry control used in conjunction with the Rad Binding Navigator control. So what I have here is an already created Winforms project, and in this project I've defined a car class that has some properties associated with it. My form itself right now is an empty canvas, but we're going to be adding some controls to this in a minute. And in my code behind for my form, I've created a private binding list of car that will hold our data. And when the form is loaded, I go ahead and pre-populate some test data within that collection. So let's go ahead and lay out our form. So I want to expand this out just a little bit so we have some extra room to work with. And from my toolbox, I'm going to drag an instance of the RadDataEntry control directly to my designer. And I'm going to set its doc property to fill just so that it fills up any available real estate. Now I talked about associating it with the Rad Binding Navigator. And to do that, I simply drag and drop the Rad Binding Navigator control directly onto my RadDataEntry control. So let's now move on to our code behind, and what I need to do now is define a binding source for that data. So you can see here I instantiated a binding source, and I've set the data source of that to our data collection, and I've told the binding source to allow new records. Then all I had to do was set the binding source of Rad Binding Navigator to the binding source, as well as the data source of the RadDataEntry control to the binding source. And that's really all there is to it. So let's go ahead and start the project. And you can see here that my form has automatically been created for me, and we have our navigation available at the top. So you can see I can scroll through the records that are available in my object collection that are part of that underlying binding data source. I can add a new record. So let's just add a new Toyota Corolla, and it's got 4 cylinders, and we'll call this a 2014. All right, and now that record is added to our underlying data source. And I can also delete a record, so if I didn't want to have the Volkswagen Golf, I can take that out. And the deletion is automatically reflected in my underlying data source, as well as in the Rad Binding Navigator. I've brought up our samples application, and let's dive into our grid view sample and navigate to our paging example. As I mentioned earlier, RadGridView has a new feature where you're able to page your data instead of having to scroll through them. So you can see that I have a grid that's already populated and grouped by country, and you can modify the behavior and the page size as you see appropriate. So right now it's set to paging before grouping, but you can always change that to grouping before paging, and it will automatically shift that behavior for you. The next thing I want to show you is the RadCollapsiblePanel. And you can see here that there's a nice fast and fluid animation associated with it, and you can change the behavior by allowing it to expand up or down or left to right. The next thing that I want to show you is in the editors, our spell checker. And the spell checker here, you can see that we have multiple text boxes. If I right click on a flagged word, I can change it from the suggestion list. And I can also add to dictionary or ignore all flagged words. Let's finish up with some resources. Find out more about Telerik at www.telerik.com. Find documentation, demos, and forums for all of our products at telerik.com/support.aspx, and find out more about UI for Winforms at telerik.com/products/winforms.
Thanks, Carrie. Again, a lot of information in a brief period of time. That closes out our Build Apps for Any Device with .NET session. Stay tuned. After a short break, we will cover solving the occasionally connected app problem with myself as well as Michael Crump.